Good afternoon, everyone, um, and welcome to our last webinar, actually, on Microsoft 365 this year. Hi, Pete. Yes, let's start with the usual way. Tell us where you are and how the weather is like. I'm in Aberdeen, and the sun is shining, which is quite rare, but it's beautiful. I just came back from a run, so yep, that's where I am. So welcome, and we are quite honored to have Vivek, who is such one of the pillars of our Microsoft Cab. To be quite honest, so Vivek has helped us a lot with the establishment of the Microsoft Cab as well. He's such a good source of information for IM and RM in 365, and you know is one of our regulars at our round tables as well. Now, overcast in Toronto. Oh gosh. Wow, you've got somebody sunny in Perth. Yes. Massimiliano, you're there. Okay. Hazy in Hitchin, Hertfordshire.
It's actually quite sunny here.
Oh, Vivek, guys, is on lockdown in Italy. And I was saying I wouldn't mind going back to Italy. Okay, so thank you for joining us today. Hey, good. Oh, beautiful in Edinburgh. That's good to go. I won't keep you up because we've got a lot of good information coming from Vivek. So now I am handing over to Vivek.
Okay, thank you, Maria. A quick sound check. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining and welcome to this session. For the next 60 minutes or 90 minutes, I will walk you through some of the key updates which have been announced by Microsoft, are either being rolled out in the information management space in Microsoft 365 or have been announced that are in development. So for this session, we're going to keep the discussion a little bit more wider and not just talk about records management. And I thought we'd kind of broaden it up to information management and including record management, information governance, and protection capabilities. So just a quick introduction. I'm part of a consultancy called Infotection, which is a Microsoft partner organization. And I lead the technology team in Infotection. And so my email address is on the top. If during the course of this session or afterwards, if you have any questions about anything that we discussed today, please feel free to reach out to me. Right, so for today's session, I have divided the updates into 3 categories. First is collaboration, where I will talk about what Microsoft is planning to release in SharePoint Online and also some components of OneDrive for Business. And then the second category is about teamwork, and I will share some of the exciting news or the top exciting items from Microsoft that are being released in Microsoft Teams. And the third category is as usual, information protection and governance. So what else Microsoft has done since we last had a discussion with Microsoft at the roundtable in terms of announcing some of the features which are in the pipeline for Microsoft. All of this information that I'm sharing with you is all publicly available on the Microsoft Office 365 roadmap, and it's just a collection of the top items which I thought might be relevant for this forum and this group. Okay, so we're going to start with collaboration first. And in that space, my first update is that Microsoft has recently launched a new capability called SharePoint Syntax. Some of you may have heard about SharePoint Syntax at the Microsoft Ignite conference and also the last roundtable where Microsoft team was present with us. And SharePoint Syntax introduces the use of advanced AI and machine teaching capabilities to help us automate the process of extracting information from the files which are stored in Microsoft 365 and enriching Microsoft 365 with useful information that is stored in the form of metadata. And quite often, I've seen that there are a number of business processes where metadata plays an important role, whether it is to support the business process or to support a particular business workflow, or even things like decision making. SharePoint Syntax provides. Oh, you're getting sound problems. Maria, can I just check if I'm coming through okay for you, or is anybody else facing problems?
You're coming in clear. Ruth, what you could do, what you could try and do is log out and then come back in. Sometimes, this is very IT crowd scenario, but it does solve it.
Yeah, try and switch it off and switch it back on again.
Unfortunately, yeah. Okay, back to you, Vivek.
Okay, thank you. So SharePoint Syntax, and quite often we have seen is that machine learning is a bit of a dark art, that people don't understand how machine identifies information and how actually it applies the intelligence. SharePoint Syntax brings machine learning closer to a human understanding, and it enables the SharePoint administrators or SharePoint site administrators to be able to use certain samples and identify certain patterns within the test set of documents to teach the system, and then change the logic as well as the system is actually finding information and actually fine-tune it. So it provides a great level of control and granularity to SharePoint site administrators to then create those models without writing a piece of code or without understanding, the machine learning technology, to use some of the familiar SharePoint features and then deploy it on SharePoint libraries for it to automatically find information that matches the criteria and extract relevant values in the form of metadata. If you want to read more about it, there is a link in this slide pack, which you will receive the slide pack at the end of it. And there's a link here where I've written a blog post about it. And I've also created a brief video where I walk through the entire process of how we can easily teach the system and then extract certain key information. In this case, I've used an example of an oil and gas industry where they receive oil samples and lubricant samples, and in the form of different unstructured documents, files, Excel spreadsheets, even emails. And we're able to leverage syntax to find key information such as the code of that oil sample and certain other key attributes which are in the content of the file, and surface that in the form of metadata columns. Right, so that's SharePoint Syntax. It's already launched, it's available, and it's now available in all the tenants publicly for access. Just a key point on it, it does require an additional license. So do check with your Microsoft contact or your tenant administration team regarding licensing. It does come with a 30-day trial license, and which is a great way, and a lot of organizations are actually using that 30-day trial license to understand whether this is for them and whether this will solve any of the current challenges. So I really encourage you to, even if you're not intending to kind of look at that 30-day trial license. It can be activated if you have a Microsoft 365 tenant. It's not available in the Enterprise 5 license. It's a separate add-on, but every single time this question comes up, I would, don't take my word for it. Please check if you are an Enterprise 5 customer to Microsoft, please check with your account team because they may have made some provisions which are specific to your organization. Okay, so the next is SharePoint Spaces. This is quite an exciting thing in terms of collaboration. And if you're using SharePoint for intranet, it allows you to it enables you to kind of add 3-dimensional content onto your SharePoint sites. And so if you have an intranet or if you have a team site, you can actually create three-dimensional content and actually position that onto your team site. Why do you need that? It's probably not required for every single scenario, but there are specific scenarios, for example, where companies or departments are actually working with mixed reality. For example, one scenario is probably an employee onboarding scenario. You could make that a very interactive scenario for employees to onboard by giving a virtual tour of your organization. So some of those scenarios can be quite useful. And the great thing about this is that it becomes really available to masses, and people can actually use it. And it's very simple, as simple as actually designing a new SharePoint page. You can create a new SharePoint space page. Okay, this is being rolled out right now, and it will be available in November. But it is available in public preview to most of the customers, and there isn't any extra licensing required for it. I did have actually an example of it. I'm just going to see if I can share it with you just very quickly. Okay, I'll come back to it later on. I can't find it right now, but it is actually quite an exciting component that has been added to SharePoint. And one place we're using is actually providing virtual tours of information and three-dimensional modeling, especially for engineering projects. The next improvement from SharePoint in the space of collaboration is any SharePoint pages that you create, they can now also be part of your metadata model, so that you can add the same level of structure as you add it to the files. So in your SharePoint pages library, you can add mandatory metadata, and that is the mandatory metadata which the publishers or the authors of those pages will be required to fill in as a mandatory value before they can publish a page out. And that is something that you might want to leverage, especially in context of extending the metadata to SharePoint pages, so that you have a consistent control and consistent governance across all your information, which is not just limited to files today in SharePoint document libraries, but extend to pages and lists as well. So that's being rolled out, and it is actually in the process of being rolled out, and it will be available to all Microsoft customers across all tenants by December 2020. And again, it is a standard functionality. It does not require any additional license. So as long as you have Microsoft E3 or enterprise license, you'll be able to get this functionality. Okay, so those are kind of the two things which I think you should remember if you're using intranet, and having the ability to apply governance and some control on how pages are created and how values are managed, and also SharePoint spaces, which allow you to create some really creative three-dimensional spaces to make your kind of intranet a lot more engaging to your users. The next is, again, quite relevant to intranet sites or team sites specifically. A lot of the times we find that on your SharePoint home pages, for example, if you have a community site or a team site or a center of excellence site, organizations find that they have to kind of do some organogram on the homepage of the team site. For example, having a picture of the team leader or an executive, and actually showing the team around them. With this new announcement, Microsoft is providing an organization chart web part. With this web part, you don't have to kind of pick pictures and text and put them together and upload them as images. You can make this organization chart web part very dynamic. And for example, you could You could do it around a particular person. So imagine if you are an HR team, and if you're in a HR team portal, then you could actually do the HR leadership or the team lead as the center of the organization, and it will start to build up the chart, the organization chart, picking up from Active Directory of the people and the reporting line, etc. So that kind of is a very intuitive and a flexible way. And as people change quite often, you don't have to redesign your page or re-upload the images. It would be as simple as changing the name of the person or a new person who is in the role in the web part, and then just saving the changes and publishing your page. So that's again being rolled out. It was planned to be rolled out in October 2020, but Microsoft is rolling out, and it will be rolled out throughout this year. So if you go and check now, it may already be part of your SharePoint tenant. And again, this is standard functionality, no additional licenses. Okay, next on the collaboration is move and keep sharing. One of the lesser known but very effective feature of SharePoint and OneDrive for Business is the ability to now seamlessly move information across different parts of Microsoft 365, which previously you would have to engage in either downloading the information and moving it, or actually using some migration tooling. But with the modern user interface in both SharePoint and OneDrive for Business, you get the move to functionality. And using that functionality, you can move a file, multiple files, or an entire folder. Sorry, yes, they are linked to the Active Directory record for the previous question of the organization web part. It pulls all the information from Azure Active Directory. So coming back to the move part, you could select an entire folder or an hierarchy of folder within SharePoint site, and you can move it to a completely different SharePoint site along with all the files and all the properties. Now, that is an existing feature, but what it didn't have is the permissions. And so, for example, if you have shared a specific file within that SharePoint site with somebody, that person would lose access to that file if that file is now moved to a different SharePoint site where they don't have access. And so that disrupts the business workflow. And especially in context of how people work in OneDrive for Business, they upload a file, they work on the file, they share the file with colleagues so that they can complete the work, and at the end of it, they intend to move that file into SharePoint so that it stays in a collaborative space. And so in those instances, SharePoint now supports, and both OneDrive support, that as you move the file, you have an option to keep any explicit sharing that you have done on that file with other people as the file moves to the new location. Yes, it keeps the share expiration as well. So if you have set an expiration date, that will expire. And as you move the file, it will keep the sharing. And if it's in the middle of the expiration, it will keep it. And then at the end of it, it will expire. And the link will not work for those individuals. So that really is actually, I mean, that really is quite a compelling feature for me, especially, and also when we talk in context of records management, the most common question I get is, should we keep our records in SharePoint sites, or should we create an archive? And I think now the organizations have a lot more flexibility and control with the ability to move things around. You could very well have a situation where the records are created in a site, let's say a project, and if the project comes to an end, and then you have the ability to seamlessly move those records into an archive or some other place where the records can live beyond the life cycle of that particular project. It does not automatically keep the sharing. It's an active action. As you see on the screen, you have to check the box here. And in that case, if you check the box at the time of moving, then it will keep the sharing permissions. So it's not a click OK, it's just a checkbox, and then the move here button that you will click. Okay, so that's on the OneDrive and move sharing. just a quick reminder, it works both when you are moving files from OneDrive to SharePoint, and also when you're moving files within SharePoint from one site or a site collection to a different site collection. And that site collection could very well be a team, and a SharePoint site connected to a Microsoft team. So kind of in essence, it actually works across OneDrive for Business, SharePoint site collections, a standalone SharePoint site collections, and also team site collections. Okay, next is, you probably have heard a lot about it. It's Microsoft Lists, which is a new capability Microsoft introducing. We have used Microsoft SharePoint lists a lot, in terms of tracking and managing lists and keeping an inventory of stuff. And they're far greater users of SharePoint lists over and above tracking. And Microsoft Lists bring a new dimension to it. It's a completely new app or an application which manages all the lists that you create across Microsoft 365. And it provides you the ability to create lists from using templates. And there are a number of predefined templates that you can use that Microsoft has created in order to create your own list. And the great thing is that these lists integrate with Microsoft Teams and mobile devices. So you could create some really engaging modern lists with a lot of formatting, color, and features, and then actually publish them, and they will be accessible through browser, desktop client, and also mobile devices. One of the great features and example practical implementation that my team has kind of worked on Microsoft Lists is the situation where, again, in context of records management, we see that not all organizations have 100% moved on to electronic or digital form of documentation. A lot of organizations, perhaps majority of the organizations, have some paper component and the need to manage paper records. So one example we have used Microsoft Lists is to actually use the Microsoft Lists to create an application which would help organizations track the paper records that they have and integrate that with retention labeling capability to actually apply retention label to that inventory so that it also simulates how the records are aging, and then use that list and integrate that with workflow, SharePoint workflows to actually trigger dispositions and trigger the disposition of the actual paper record when they come to the end of retention period. So that's just one example where you could kind of use lists to kind of create and solve some real business problems or support some business processes. So yes, indeed. So really great for actually having to convert your Excel spreadsheets as well in here, and the formatting is quite visual in Microsoft Lists, and it provides a really visual and really engaging way by which you can kind of work with Microsoft Lists compared to SharePoint Lists, which kind of tend to be rather flat and boring. So do check out this. This is available right now, and it should be in all of your tenants. And if you click on your, if you're in SharePoint, and at the top left-hand corner, you see a waffle sign. And if you expand it, you should now see an option of Microsoft Lists appearing over there. You don't need an administrative privilege. You can all create your own lists and actually manage them. Again, not an additional license. It's part of the E3 license. Lists are stored in SharePoint. They are, so good question, actually. Microsoft Lists are no different than SharePoint Lists. They are built on the SharePoint List infrastructure, but they provide additional capabilities in terms of, predefined templates, and also better formatting controls that you don't have in SharePoint Lists. Okay. You can create a list and you can create in a SharePoint site collection, or you can store that list in your team as well. Okay, and when you store that in a team, it starts to appear in your Teams interface as well. Okay, so the next update from Microsoft is again another name. Keep coming up with these names which are hard to keep track of, but this one is called Project Nucleus, and it's kind of part of the same project Syntax Cortex family of products that they're releasing. Project Nucleus is really addressing a specific concern regarding performance, especially in case of SharePoint lists, where SharePoint lists are kind of sometimes people, there's a lot of information that gets stored in SharePoint lists, and sometimes they actually hit that throttling limit of 5,000, and quite often there's more than 5,000 items get stored in SharePoint lists. With this, Microsoft is actually looking at making SharePoint lists accessible offline. And so it will provide you a basic offline capabilities, which means you don't always have.
Vivek, I think we've lost Vivek for, let me, yes, we have Pete. Let me try and find Vivek somewhere in Italy. So just give us a second. Oh, here we go. Vivek is back.
Hi, my connection just dropped. Apologies. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where did you lose me?
We were concerned. Oh, Neil is here. Hi, Neil. Good to see you here. Okay, so Vivek has dropped for a while.
Okay, Maria, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Even Neil is having some issues as well. We must have some. Our recording is continuing. Neil, there's going to be a recording immediately after this session. You will get the link to the recording, Neil. Vivek, would you like to continue now? Are you able to continue? Vivek? Okay, so it's telling me that Vivek Bhatt has lost internet connection. It does that. Okay, while we're waiting for Vivek, so guys, are there any questions on what he has shown us so far? We've had a lot of these webinars, and this is the first time that we've encountered this. I mean, most of you have been on our webinars. Some of the names are quite familiar. Yes, that's right, Mark. So what I'll do is I will get Vivek to share it in our chat straight away. Oh, there you go. That's for Project Nucleus. I think Mark must have been the first one that Vivek shared for Syntax rather than Nucleus. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, Ryan. So, gosh. Oh, that's really great that everybody is trying to get this. Sean, you could use a lot of the functionalities as a retention schedulist. I have done it before in the old SharePoint, and now it's more it's designing it, which to suit whatever it is that you need, which is quite exciting. Not just Microsoft List. not just Microsoft List, but you can combine it with all the other applications that are made available to you via 365. You could workflows, you could put it through reports to you as well. So yes, definitely, if you start exploring it, Sean. Pete, anyone on the stream actually using List to manage paper records? I have seen this in oil and gas. Neil Studolf is I wonder if Neil Studolf is still here, but they use it to basically keep the logs. But then always remember that you need to sync with your paper records provider. So, yep. So Donald, thank you for that feedback. So I've in the oil and gas business, you need to sync it with your provider, be it if it's C21 or some of the other companies that provide you with this information, because yep, that's more important as well. Or I've seen lists where it is
Maria, I'm back now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. So I can also help if anybody needs an offline discussion to also show you and give you a demo of how we have managed the lists and created workflows on top to kind of manage and track paper records and especially manage the retention period and disposition of paper records.
Yeah. Donald, if you want, we could, I'll reach out to you. Maybe you could demonstrate that together so that the entire community can learn from what you've done. Yeah. Yeah, we could do a short session where you could share that, Donald, if that would be great. Okay, Vivek, let us go back to Project Nucleus.
Okay, I hope I'll stick around for longer than I did last time. So Project Nucleus, very quickly, it is aiming at, especially where you have large lists and where you have used lists to create certain tracking mechanism or using the list for access from your mobile devices, etc. It really is taking it forward and actually letting you keep those lists in an offline mode, similar to how you have documents that can be synced and accessible offline. Your lists are not today. And so Microsoft will extend that OneDrive for sync capability, which allows you to sync your OneDrive for business files, your SharePoint files, and soon you would be able to also offline access and have an offline availability of lists, which means you can access those lists. It's not fully clear which functions that you would be able to perform, and we're trying to get that information from Microsoft. But that really is quite an exciting piece of functionality that is coming in a couple of months. Okay, so this one is in development. There isn't a date announced for when this will be available, and there's this kind of the information that is available to us right now. We've posted that information on the blog post. So keep an eye when that becomes available in one of these roundtables. If people have any interest, then I'll be happy to share and announce that information. And you will also hear that from the CAB that we are constantly going to discuss with Microsoft. Okay, so that completes the updates that I had to share on collaboration. Next, before I move on to teamwork, Maria, is it worth pausing for any questions?
Sorry, I was on mute. Guys, are there any questions before we move forward? Okay, I think you can continue. Oh, Massimiliano, okay. Is there a question? Okay, I think we can continue, and then we could pause again later on. Thanks, Vivek.
Okay, great. Right, so next is teamwork, and this is all focused around Microsoft Teams and what new capabilities Microsoft is bringing into Microsoft Teams. So the first update, and there's a ton of functionalities coming in Microsoft Teams. I've picked up the ones which are relevant in context of information management. So the first update that Microsoft is releasing is about reminder when your meeting is about to finish. And so it will give you a reminder 5 minutes before your meeting is about to come to an end. It will not end the meeting, but it's a soft reminder for you to finish your meeting. And quite often, I personally also struggle with when I have back-to-back meetings. A meeting overruns and I find myself into a domino effect. And quite often is because I'm simply talking and I don't realize that the meeting is about to come to an end. So this is a good reminder. It gives everybody a notification that you have certain amount of time left, which is 5 minutes, so that you get a chance to wrap up your meeting and bring it to a conclusion, rather than having to just dash out of the meeting in a rush before completing your discussion. So that's being rolled out. It's already available in certain tenants. It definitely is available in my tenant. So keep an eye on it. In next couple of weeks, you might see this popping up in your Teams meeting before 5 minutes the meeting finishes. Okay. The next is again sort of like on that productivity side, how we manage not only just our information, but also our own time. You will be able to set your status and set your focus time in Microsoft Teams. As people are getting more and more on Teams and getting actually a lot of pings on Microsoft Teams, you could set your availability status, and you don't have to change it. So for example, if you want to have a focus time and you want to put a do not disturb sign on your team so that you don't get notifications, then you don't have to think about changing it after 2 hours. You can tell the system, set this to 2 hours, and after that, go back to my previous availability status, and the system will do it for you. In addition to that, you also get a new status, which is appear offline. I'm not sure in which circumstances you would want to appear offline but still working. But if you are and looking to just get away from it all and not to be disturbed by anybody, then you can actually use that option, and it should be available very soon in your tenant. Okay, so the next update is the new file sharing experience. If you are using OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online today with the modern experience that we just talked about with Move To and all those features, then you have already noticed that you can share your files from SharePoint or OneDrive for Business using the share functionality. And that creates a link that you can share with people or send an email to people. That same feature is now coming to Microsoft Teams. And the great thing about it is that you could copy that link from OneDrive for Business or SharePoint, paste it into a Teams chat, and when you paste that link, it will give you the option to manage the permissions as you're pasting it in Microsoft Teams. And the experience and the look and feel would be very similar to how the experience is today when you share the link or a file with somebody in OneDrive for Business or SharePoint. Okay, if you want to know more about it, there's again another blog post I've written where I've talked a little bit more about this and also some of the other file sharing experience extensions which are going on within Microsoft 365 and not just in Microsoft Teams. So please have a read through it. You won't get any notification. This feature is kind of one of the minor changes that Microsoft is making, but in my mind is actually very, very effective, that I can actually do that sharing in time, in the moment, when I'm actually sending a message to somebody in Microsoft Teams. Okay, so keep an eye on it. It's going to come in next couple of weeks, and it should very soon be available in your tenant. So next time you are copying a link and sharing it, just keep an eye on that additional option being available in Microsoft Teams. Okay, this one is really a lifesaver for me especially, and I do get a lot of background noise. I have 2 dogs, and they go off anytime without any notification or without any consideration that I'm on a call. So this actually is really really Microsoft's AI making those small changes and subtle changes to make that big difference. And so soon, if not already, you should be able to see an option in Microsoft Teams to change your noise suppression setting. And so that option already exists in Microsoft Teams, but now you will have an additional option to set it to high, and it will significantly suppress the background noise. And there's a YouTube video from Microsoft about how good it is, and they one of their employees is actually giving a demonstration of when he's crunching a packet of crisp with no suppression, and crunching a packet of crisp on a call with high suppression. The difference is quite significant. It's to be tested. It's now available in some tenants. It hasn't yet come to my tenant, so I can't tell you right now if the call quality is actually, to what ratio and to what percentage, but keep an eye on it. The thing to note is that it will not by default change the setting. You will have to go and change that setting, and on the screen you see you'll have to go into your Teams settings, devices. There's an option called noise suppression. It will by default be set to auto, and not many people actually know this and don't actually change that option. In the drop down, you have a couple of options available, and one of the option would be high. And if you want to suppress, and if you tend to work kind of in places where you have a background noise coming through, then that may be an option to actually test and try it if it actually makes any difference. It will definitely save you a lot of cost in actually buying expensive headsets which claim to do noise suppression. Okay. The next is, I'm going to talk less about it, but it's worth explaining. This is a major feature which is been lacking in Microsoft capabilities, especially with some of their other competitors. Teams will now provide, or very soon will provide, the ability to create virtual breakout rooms. Very useful when we hold workshops, to kind of create those virtual breakout areas or breakout sessions. We can't do that at the moment. So this is a very useful functionality which will help us in kind of effectively managing large workshops and large kind of discussions where not always everybody has to sit in the same discussion. So that's coming mid-November. It again will be available, and very soon you should be able to see an icon like this. It's a tiny one. Hopefully you can see it. That's the icon which will show you when you can create a breakout room in a meeting that you are in. Okay, so that completes all the features and all the key features from a teamwork point of view. Quick pause. Any questions so far?
Guys, any questions so far? You're just excited about all these new features coming into your hands and tenancy. Yeah. Okay, Vivek, let's move on to.
Okay, so I realize that I'm running quite quick, and I'm already to the last section. So if I carry on like this, then I probably might be able to give all of you some time back. So let's carry on, but please feel free to ask any questions throughout this session or also afterwards. If there is anything that you don't see here but is on your mind in terms of collaboration, teamwork, or even records management that you see that is a concern, if there is a time left, and by the sounds of it, there will be time left, we can probably have a discussion and actually collect some of those questions, and through our CAB we can ask Microsoft their position on some of those items. Okay, so the final leg is protection and governance. Right, so the first, from a privacy and protection point of view, this new feature coming in Microsoft Teams, especially if you're using Teams on mobile devices, Android, Apple, or other platforms, you would then be able to configure a policy, or your administrators would be able to configure a policy that hides the notification, the preview notification. Quite often we get that in the preview panel, and kind of gives away if it is a sensitive message, and if you're holding a mobile phone, quite often people have Teams and work accounts on their private mobile devices, and so this is a way by which you can prevent accidental sharing of information if you are in discussions with somebody who is not related to work, and there might be a risk of sharing that information with them. So in those instances, Teams will provide you a notification that there is a new activity, but it won't show you what that message is. And in order to see that message, you will have to go into Teams and actually access it. Okay, so that is rolling out, and anything that is rolling out could be in your tenant or on your mobile devices from now and in a couple of weeks' time. Okay, so that would be first available to the Teams admins, and it's something that the Teams admins will have to configure as a policy. And once they configure the policy centrally, then it will be applied to all Teams users who are accessing Teams on mobile devices. Okay. Next one. This is quite a big one from a records management point of view. Any Teams meetings that we organize, whether as a meeting in a Teams channel or in OneDrive for Business, or a private chat or a private meeting, today they all get stored in Microsoft Stream. With this new release, which was due to come out a couple of months ago, has been postponed to mid-November, but is eventually coming out, and will transfer the ability to automatically store those recordings in Stream to SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. Now, that's really, really important, because quite often those meeting recordings could be records, and by storing them in Stream, it creates a whole host of additional overheads that those recordings that need to be managed as records. But by keeping them in SharePoint or in OneDrive for Business, from where you can move it to SharePoint, depending upon your organization policy, you could actually apply retention capabilities to it. Not only you can apply retention capabilities to it, you can manage them as records, you can apply a disposition cycle to it, and you can also search them using the consistent enterprise search interface. And finally, it also integrates with the e-discovery capabilities. So for litigation and support of litigation processes, they can all be done now through a single interface, whereas Stream was disconnected and didn't have that integration with Microsoft compliance protection capabilities. By storing these Stream videos in SharePoint and OneDrive for Business, Microsoft provides a way to integrate all of those compliance features to extending them to Teams recordings. Yes, when they are stored in OneDrive for Business or SharePoint, you can also see the properties of it and the metadata that is associated with it. That's an interesting one. Any way to apply automated disposal of the recording itself, Mark? It's a good question, actually. I will take it away and actually discuss it and find out what might be, what might be the possibilities there, because it's actually, that's quite interesting. Quite often we are only interested in the transcript and not the video as such. So Maria, I will check on this with Microsoft, the possibilities, and if you don't mind making a note, we can come back to it later on in one of our following roundtables.
Yes, we can. So Mark, what we'll do is we'll give out an update the community with regards to this one. That's a very good question that will get Microsoft to respond to as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so next is OneDrive. So a new protection capability which is coming to OneDrive is blocking the download support. And today you can block the download support for all other files except for video files. You would be able to choose that for video files as well. And especially now that is in context of team recordings being stored in OneDrive for Business, or SharePoint, this becomes quite handy and goes hand in hand with that feature, that if you're sharing that recording with someone, you can block the download so they can view it online, but they won't be able to take a copy of it. Okay. The next is some improvements which are coming from...
Vivek, we have a question from Sean. Sir, that there will be a feature where a retention policy can be set specifically for meeting recordings wherever they're stored. Is that limited to E5?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's an E5 feature. So you can definitely use it as long as it's a retention policy, not a record policy. You can set it in Compliance Center, and you can apply it directly to meeting recordings.
And her next question is, can we centrally block downloads of videos recordings?
Not through this feature, but there are additional administrative controls available in the tenant which can allow blocking of certain types of download. The blocking, block the download of certain type of files.
Yep. Yeah. Would IRM do it? Information rights management.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So moving on, the next is from auditing point of view. Microsoft is adding more events to the audit log, and this one is about adding mailbox capabilities, so exchange mailboxes, and using this feature you would be able to identify when the mailbox items were accessed. Not only will it actually let you do that, there are a few more filters which are being added, and I have to check if I have a next slide on it. No. Okay. So let me just go back to the previous slide. So this includes adding events related to also things like sending, replying, and forwarding email messages. So they all will get audited in a single Office 365 audit log, which from where you can extract the information, or your compliance administrators can, or they are also integrated with APIs, which Microsoft called them as management APIs, which integrate directly with things like Power BI. So very useful from an e-discovery litigation point of view. And for example, if there are compromised accounts or there are litigation events, it's very important to know when the email was sent or received, which is often quite hard to find out by looking at an individual mailbox. This will now all be centrally logged for every single email. Okay. And then finally, these events can integrate with Power BI, as I said, using management APIs to build a dashboard if you are interested in tracking some of the audit events. But this one specifically is more from a litigation and e-discovery point of view. Okay. I'm almost coming to an end to my slides, so bear with me a couple of more slides and then we'll get into the questions. The next is the Compliance Center expansion of allowing the e-discovery to happen in recycle bin. Now, this is from a business point of view has no impact to the end users, but it's a big change from people who are engaged in e-discovery or litigation roles. Previously, if a site isn't on hold, the e-discovery managers or the record managers won't be able to perform a search and find information in the recycle bin of OneDrive for Business or SharePoint. With this change, it extends the capability of content search or e-discovery search to recycle bins as well. So it will find the information, and you don't have to put a hold on the site collection just because you want to access and export the data which is sitting in recycle bins. And so that lifts a lot of overheads which the e-discovery teams are managing today. And I don't know if it's the case in your organizations, but some of the organizations that I've worked in, they have a habit of, because they can't access the recycle bin, and they have a process by which they apply a hold to a lot of site collections. So there's an over retention of information which happens from a litigation point of view, because they simply can't access the information in certain areas. With this, they can perform export and perform their due diligence without having to, they can still apply the hold, but for an initial analysis and for sorting, they don't have to do that. And so it's accessible in recycle bins now.
Oh no! So Vivek, that the 93-day retention period in the recycle bins 1 and 2, both are now indexed, so both are searchable now, because
Yes.
it's an impact for government because of the SARS and FOIs. Because previously, the impact was because they're not indexed and not searchable. They are how do you call this? They are that it doesn't impact the
They're gone basically.
And
Yeah.
Yep. So gone now. Okay. So that's very important for a number of people in this call, because that would impact our search. So now we have to be, right. That's correct, Henry. Yeah.
So clarification: it's still not searchable through enterprise search. It's only searchable for e-discovery managers. So people who are part of subject access requests and FOIA requests, etc.
Yeah. That's it's just an important thing to note for everybody on this call, because previously it was exempted from those, but now when is this becoming available? January.
January 2021. Yeah.
Okay.
And before that, there will be private and public previews, and we can discuss this in our CAB, although our CAB is very specific on records management. But if anybody has interest or any concern, let me know afterwards. I can definitely bring those discussions up with Microsoft.
Yeah, so I was going to say, Sean, it must be a requirement outside government. So there must be a requirement that Microsoft responded to. That's why they made the recycle bins accessible. It may not be SARS or FOI specific, but that's yes, that is.
Yeah, a lot of I've definitely seen that in some of the private enterprises and companies, like oil and gas. It's one of the issues that they struggle with, that unable to access information if somebody has deleted that information during the course of an investigation. Okay, so I'm glad that it started some discussion. I was thinking whether people would be interested in this update or not. So I'm glad that I added it. Okay, so the next one, and perhaps the last one before we close the session, I think there's one more after this, is records management. Microsoft is introducing regulatory record as a new type of setting. And so for organizations, especially, I'm not sure how pertinent it is to the public sector, but especially in the finance sector, it's quite important that the records management capability right now provides an immutability, but there are certain roles and permission levels which can override that. And so in certain situations, using the current record management capability, for example, an administrator could go in and actually remove that record label and then delete the file. And it could result in the loss of a record and a loss of an information. So the regulatory record setting is not a different functionality, it's a setting in the same record retention label, which will provide the organizations the ability to completely lock certain records, so that not even the administrator or Microsoft can actually delete that record for that matter. And so once it's configured with that setting, the records become truly immutable, and it is directly aimed at addressing the worm compliance requirements, which are quite prevalent in the finance industry.
Vivek,
Okay.
is this used in coordination with enabling the records management capability, or is it just across the platform?
It is when you enable the records management capability. But once you enable it, you can then deploy that label anywhere in the platform, not just SharePoint.
Okay, so
you could deploy that in you could deploy that in Exchange, and it will have the same effect that when that label with regulatory setting, it will then make that email immutable and nobody will be able to delete it.
Yep, something good to test.
Yes. So as you can see here, the comparison, from a retention label to a regulatory record. I've kind of put together a quick summary of some of the key actions that people are interested in and how they kind of change or don't change as you kind of upgrade your retention label from a retention label which is configured to just retain the information even if the user deletes it, to record label, which makes it immutable so that the content of the file is locked and the user can't delete it, but the administrators can remove the label and delete it, and to all the way up to regulatory record that nobody can delete that record and it becomes immutable. Nobody can change the content, delete, or modify the file. Okay, so just in the interest of time, I'll just pick up maybe one quick, especially editing the properties and including things like renaming the file. With a retention label, you can do it. You can rename the file. You can change the metadata and properties. With a record label, whether it is locked or not locked, you can always change the file properties, including the file name. But with a regulatory record, you cannot change that. So not even the change to the metadata is possible over and above being not able to change the content and delete the file. Okay, so something keep in mind, my note on, it provides great control, but also it's something that you want to use it with a bit of caution and preparation to make sure that not every record falls into that category, or especially if you're deploying it, then it could create some operational challenges, especially if you are deploying it into locations where people are working with active information. So that's just a quick one.
So Vivek, that means the. Oh, okay. Henry has a question. So how is it deployed? Are you talking about?
Great question. So two ways of deploying it. You could either deploy it to a SharePoint site. Let's say, I'm using SharePoint site as an example because that's most familiar. You can deploy it to team as well. You could deploy it through a label policy to a SharePoint site, and then it will become visible for the end user to select and tag the information. And then when they tag it, then it becomes a record and then applies all the controls. That's one. The second is you can use it to auto apply. So it's not visible to anybody. Nobody can select it, but based on certain metadata properties or certain keywords, you could deploy it to either all SharePoint site collections or specific site collections. And when it finds the matching criteria, it will then automatically apply that regulatory record label to the file and then lock it and then applies all the regulatory controls.
Vivek, auto application.
Yes, the auto application is E5, and yes, it is E5, and the regulatory record is also E5. Well, actually, clarification. When I say E5, you don't have to buy the full E5. There is an add-on, specific add-on for this functionality. So you can buy the information protection and governance add-on. I can offline give you the right name for it, which is a lot more cheaper than actually buying the full E5 license.
That's good to know, Vivek. I was going to ask, we did mention that regulatory records, you are not able to change the properties, metadata.
Correct.
Is that okay? So this is, once you apply it, you cannot make the record superseded or obsolete because that's a change on the property. So that it would be good to note that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I picked up this one, because that's that's a common scenario that even though the record becomes immutable, there are, things like restructuring. And if organizations have, business process, organization details in their metadata, and that's tied to a record, then you won't be able to change that. So that's just to keep in mind.
Yeah. So if you know that a record is going to be superseded or become obsolete at some point, it is not good to apply the regulatory records label then. Thanks, Vivek.
Yeah, I think that's more suitable to, especially in scenarios where you have permanent records, is probably where I kind of am seeing, where in the non-finance scenarios is one use case where it's a permanent record, and hence for that matter they want it to be completely immutable because it's going to stay there for 99 years or more.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep, that's very good to know. Everybody on the call, all the records managers there. Okay, let me have a look at questions from him. Is content deleted as per retention labels kept in the recycle bin for the 93 days? Oh, Henry, sorry. Yes, that's still a yes. It's still 93 days between the two recycle bins, isn't it, Vivek?
Yeah, the only addition to that is that it doesn't go to the first stage recycle bin. It goes to the administrator recycle bin. So it's not available to anybody except the administrator, and before it gets deleted.
Okay, thank you. What is there, following on from there, because I've encountered some requirements from some governments as well. Can the 93 days be requested from Microsoft to be extended?
No, no, we've tried that. A lot of companies have tried that. It's not configurable. It can't be changed. And yeah, even some of the Microsoft, top 10 customers who spend a lot of money on Microsoft, they have asked that question, and the answer has been, unfortunately, no.
No. Okay. Thanks, Vivek.
Yeah, so I can tell you that I think that's absolutely no. It's not. I'd be surprised, shocked, and also very disappointed if Microsoft changed that, because I've gone through some very painful discussions with some of my customers that this can't be changed. Okay, any other questions? I have just one final slide just to give you a final roundup on some of the other features that I haven't gone into the details, but I would just briefly mention them. But a quick pause. Any other questions?
Yes, guys, you're burning questions for 365 so that it can be retired now before the holiday break. Would be good. Any more questions?
Okay.
Yep. Okay, I think we could Massimiliano, we'll wait for whatever it is that you're typing. And while we're waiting for that, you want to start introducing your roundup?
Yes. So just a final slide before I close my talk and we go into the discussion. Some other new capabilities which are worth keeping mind on is retention capability is also extending to Yammer. So if you're using Yammer in your organization, as of today, you can't apply automated retention capabilities. That's coming to Yammer as well. And through Compliance Center, you would be able to set the retention labels, retention policies, e-discovery capabilities, subject access requests, all of that on Yammer as well. So that's available for public preview right now. Microsoft hasn't announced when it will be available to all tenants, but keep an eye on it. We've talked about retention and auto labeling for Teams meeting recordings. That's coming soon. We've covered that. The next is Microsoft is also introducing a set of 25 pre-built connectors, which will enable you in Microsoft 365 to bring information from other sources and provide a unified view on search experience. And one such connector I'm really excited about is actually being able to access share network drives and data that you're storing in Azure storage. So if you have locations in Azure or elsewhere which are kind of your cheap storage, where you have data sitting in there for a few years, and you have built solutions to access them. You could think about actually indexing them using these pre-built connectors and let your users access that data through the same SharePoint search, and it will provide you information on where the information is coming from and which source it is coming from. So just wanted to briefly mention that. If any questions on that or follow up, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to share more details on it.
Vivek, we have a question from Sean. YAMA retention for what license? I don't think there's a license.
It's part of the E3 license, so it's just the standard retention policy that Microsoft is integrating, and the standard e-discovery. Obviously, the advanced e-discovery capabilities come with a different license, but the basic functionality is E3. The next is, we talked about syntax, which is the document understanding model. It's called a syntax. That's available right now on a trial. We've covered that in the first one. We've covered the regulatory record label, which is part of the public preview now. And finally, Microsoft is getting ready to release their machine learning capability for auto application of retention and other types of labels within Microsoft 365. They call that functionality as trainable classifiers. I haven't got a link with me, but my team has written some blog posts on it. So, as a follow-up to this, Maria, I'll share the link with you where we have documented some knowledge articles on it. And we've done a lot of testing on it. And basically, that trainable classifier now provides the ability for you to train the model and actually in real time get the feedback on the real-time data as to how the information has been identified based on, let's say, PII data or a GDPR template, identify and then take some actions on it, and then refine it before you actually fully deploy that into your production system.
Yeah, it's a very important feature for our community here, actually, because it solves a lot of the headaches. It gives better insights as well.
Yeah, I think if it is of interest, I think one of the follow-up roundtables we could actually get, either me or Microsoft or jointly, we could do a session on how the trainable classifiers actually look, feel, and work in context of retention labels.
Yeah, it would be good to be included in our next roundtable. I think our next roundtable would be for, is M365 a good solution for content management? I think that's perfect. This is perfect for that roundtable.
Okay, I can let me know, Maria, the dates, etc., and I can kind of organize a slot where we can do a short demonstration of the actual functionality rather than just the slideware.
Yeah, with Roberto or some of the other guys, or
somebody in his team. I work closely with their team, so I can bring one of the engineers.
Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you. I think the community would love that. Would find it informative as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, I keep saying finally. I have one more slide. So just finally, I've also included a list of all the references, some ebooks, some other blogs, and also some Microsoft articles and Microsoft videos where you can go and learn more about some of these features and some of the other capabilities, and also raise your voice with Microsoft using the user voice community. So please have a look, check out if you have time, and give us feedback actually if there is anything else that comes to your mind. And then that brings me to the end of it. So thank you for listening to me. I hope you found it useful. We have some time left, so we'll pause now for any questions or any other discussion items.
Yeah. Well, feedback for our CAB as well. One of the things that we are thankful for this community and you guys who have attended is your support for the Microsoft CAB initiatives that we have, and would be great to continue getting feedback from you guys for the CAB as well, because we could drive that could help us drive it more productively for our community. Any more questions for Vivek, please, guys? So the video of this, the recording of this session, I will be requesting this one. Oh, thanks Caroline. I will be requesting for this one to be uploaded to YouTube as well. For the slides that Vivek has been sharing, I'll try and share it. I'll share it two ways. I'll share it on the JISC mail, or Vivek can share it directly on JISC mail, and I will share it as a downloadable stuff through our IRMS webpage for the IRMS members as well. Yes, Henry, you'll be able to see the first 30 minutes that you've missed. And Vivek, any more last? I remember, if you've got any burning questions for Vivek, his email is vivek.b@infotection.com. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Henry. And thank you very much, guys, and really appreciate your continued support with our webinars. Thank you.